This is the Fire Dog Podcast.
The views and opinions presented on today's episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.
Welcome. My name is Chris Boykley, and thank you for joining us on episode 54 of the Fire Dog Podcast. In this episode, I have the privilege of speaking with Chief Warrant Officer Justin Barnes. Over the past 2 decades, he served around the world, from combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan to shaping thousands of Marines as a drill instructor to earning national recognition as the 2022 DoD Military Fire Officer of the Year. Today, he continues to mentor the next generation of leaders as the Marine Corps Liaison Officer at the Joint Fire Protection Academy in San Angelo, Texas. Chief, we are glad to have you on our podcast.
Oh, it's great to be on. I appreciate it.
Man, let's dive right in. Will you hit us with a little bit of your background? Tell us about what motivated you to join the Marine Corps back in 2002 and some of the high points of your career to this point.
Absolutely. I'll be honest, I didn't intend on joining the military after high school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it seemed as if people around me, my close friends, social network, everybody had a plan. Everybody kind of had ambition. They had a direction, and I really didn't. I wasn't really into anything after high school, and the military wasn't even one of those options. I didn't see that as a choice of mine until a buddy of mine had said, well, if you don't know where you're going, just think about the military. And I was like, yeah, I guess, maybe. And after I talked to a few of the branches, I figured if I was going to challenge myself, I would choose what I thought was the most challenging at the time. And it could have been anything. It could have been any of the services. Because they're all challenging, but this one to me at the time, at least the way the guy sold me on it was more challenging. So I took it. And here I am, a couple decades later.
You did start out in fire protection, right? You started with
I didn't. Yeah, right. I started off as a bulk fuel specialist, dealing with fuel storage, fuel transportation. They did long distance transfers. They did fuel farms. We had these, the big gas trucks like you see on the road, camouflaged. They've since changed a lot over the years, but when I got in, they were still the stick shift trucks. So,
okay. What led to the shift to firefighting?
So a lot of things. So I did 4 years active duty. And then, a deployment, overseas tour, and I ended up getting out of the Marine Corps. I got my DD-214, and I was out. Didn't just want to do something else. And then it was about 2007-ish. The Marine Corps started to plus up their numbers. I don't want to misspeak, but I believe it was right around when the U.S. was going into Iraq and Afghanistan at the same time. They were doing some plus up type stuff, and I know a lot of my friends had gotten recalled off of in the reserve, and because you do 4 years on the inactive reserve side as part of an 8-year contract, and I thought I'll come back in, if I don't want to get recalled and do something I don't want to do. And so I went and saw the recruiter, and he said, well, what do you want to do? Because your job field is closed, and my previous job. So I was like, man. He's like, well, give me 3 choices. And so I told him engineers, that's something I could probably use. EOD, that they were always the cool kids. And then I said, what else do you need? And he said, well, firefighting, it has some spaces open. And I was like, sure, put it on there. And, but in that order. And so he called me the next day and he said, hey, I got a spot for you with fire. Yeah. So, went back in.
thing.
Yeah, well, it was in the cards, but yeah.
So now, as a chief warrant officer, there's all kinds of Air Force guys listening who just went cross-eyed since we don't have warrant officers in the Air Force. Will you school us on what that means for your career?
Absolutely. So there are two job fields that feed the chief warrant officer. 7002 is our occupational specialty number. It's an expeditionary airfield and emergency services officer. And so the two fields are fire and expeditionary airfields, two separate job fields. And we oversee both of those job fields. So as an officer in charge of fire, simultaneously officer in charge of expeditionary airfields, and that EAF, expeditionary airfield occupational field, deals with the expeditionary surfacing, lighting, and arresting systems, so like the MOS gear, and so we do all that and the fire officer duties as well.
So will you serve as, in the Air Force, we've got our CE commander, who, is the officer, over fire protection. Is that, we're a squadron structure, but is that kind of a similar comparison to your responsibilities, but, just for the two career fields?
So a little bit lower than that. Wherever I go, I have a lieutenant colonel or, 05 commander in the tactical, in the operating forces. And so usually those units, like I know you had talked on previous podcasts about the Marine Wing Support Squadrons, kind of like the get the DCWs for the Air Force guys. And so those Marine Wing Support Squadrons are broken down into a few different company levels, so smaller echelon elements. Airfield operations is one of those elements. And so within that airfield operation element, you've got fuels, expeditionary airfields, and fire. And so we have that package. I have at times led that company level a couple different times in my career as a chief warrant officer. And it's actually helped to have that prior job as a fuels guy, knowing what they do, having previously done that for 4 years, having all of the job field specialty designators in that one company, it's helped me explain a lot of things, in some time sensitive environments.
And so now your job at Goodfellow.
Yeah, so now I'm the Marine Corps Liaison Officer at Goodfellow, and so I oversee all the Marine Corps interests as part of the school. And to go back to your previous question too, how it kind of links up, the CE commander speaks engineer typically, right? Having gone through a lot of the schools that they have gone through, the Contingency Airfield Pavement Evaluation course at Tyndall Air Force Base Cape, and the Marine Corps has similar schools that have probably been taken from the Air Force and stamp our logo on it. And it allows me to speak that language. And here at Goodfellow, same thing. The CE commander, the fire protection course commander is typically an engineer. So I kind of speak his language and explain things through that lens. It allows us to connect.
Got it. Awesome. Well, man, from over the course of your career, you've served in some pretty challenging environments. Being in the early 2000s, everything going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, spending time as a drill instructor, which in itself is no joke. I feel like the phrase, be comfortable being uncomfortable gets thrown around the military a little bit, but what does that actually look like in your career?
So that phrase can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It's different. I think there's different levels and thresholds of, being comfortable while uncomfortable. But for me, I think time and experience has inherently, I think, as it would anybody, given me a sense of being comfortable in at least moderate chaos. prime example, you mentioned drill instructor duty. As a drill instructor, you get on day one a fresh batch of recruits that come from all walks of life. That none of them know each other. Every demographic is different. Some come from farms, some come from inner cities. You get dropped off at your doorstep, 90-ish recruits, and you have 17 training days to get them ready for their initial evaluation of drill. So marching in unison with a rifle, listening to commands, and reacting all together at the same exact time. So you have 17 days to get every single recruit up to speed, and that is a lot of chaos that has to happen. So as drill instructors, we use chaos to get the recruits to come together. So there is not a time in the day that it's not loud, fast, physical stress, speed. It's wild, but we do that on purpose. And what that does is that helps the recruits come together and overcome that stress as a team. And that's pretty similar, I think, in any service, any boot camp type setting. But we use stress to our advantage. By having to do that for 3 years as a drill instructor, it helped me grow and be comfortable in those situations to where you could walk into any environment on the Marine Corps recruit depot, and it's just normal. It's just that stress, that noise, that chaos. It's just normal, and it almost felt abnormal not being in it. Yeah.
Well, so what are some of the things that you would look for in recruits when you're creating this chaos and this stressful environment? Obviously it's when you're on the other side of things as the recruit, it's like, man, the drill instructor's God, but what a fun job it seems like it would be to just make things hard and miserable when it's really not. Really, it's a lot of work with a pointed outcome that you're seeking from the recruit. So what are some of the things that you would look for in the way they responded to the stress that you were throwing at them? So
you're a team. There's a drill instructor team. You'll typically have 2, 3, or 4 of you part of that recruit platoon, and each drill instructor has its own responsibilities and roles. Like as a brand new drill instructor, your job is to just create chaos. You're implementing a lot of that stress. As a more junior, as a more senior drill instructor, not the senior, but the next level up, you're the one teaching a lot of the things that need to be taught. But you need their focus. You need them to pay attention. But you also need them to do exactly what you're telling them to do, and that reinforcements from the back and the chaos. But you're looking for somebody who can respond instant, willingness and obedience to these orders. You're looking for who's able to teach their rackmate, their bunkmate if they can't figure something out. You're looking for sacrifice, someone willing to sacrifice some of their time. Maybe you're up at night helping someone study. I'm actually making it sound a lot less stressful than it is by saying that. But who's going to crack? Who's going to fold under the stress? Because there's a lot that do. Day one, day two, because that's the most amount of stress they've ever felt in their life. A lot of, I would say, probably all of them. You're giving them 5 seconds to put boots on and socks. That time always ticking down creates some of that internal stress that they got to get through. Just getting them dressed. Day one in the morning, get them dressed, get them out the door to breakfast. So, but you're looking for a lot of things. Who's not going to break? Who's not crying? So, And they're typically leaders. You could make them leaders, squad leaders. There's different billets that you'll give them.
I feel like there are so many parallels there to training firefighters as well that we'll see at the DoD Firefighter Rescue and Survival School, where you're looking for students to prioritize and execute. Right, you're looking for them to be able to see through all the chaos, all the details that are being thrown at them, to be able to make decisions and to be able to adapt when conditions change. And I think we see the exact same thing that you mentioned, where a lot of people come into the course or their first day, in Marine Corps boot camp. It's likely the most stressful thing they've ever encountered. And I feel like we're at such a unique point where modern society, like our life has evolved so much. It's become so convenient and luxurious in a way, right? Where you can, from your couch, you can have whatever game, whatever movie, whatever song you want in the whole world at your fingertips in seconds. And you could have DoorDash and Amazon deliver anything your heart desires within minutes. Where the days of new firefighters or new military members growing up on a farm, working sun up to sundown, in the weather and real physical adversity are long gone. And so it feels like we're at this point in society where it's like opportunities to be uncomfortable are so rare that it may just be, in basic training or at certain courses where, we even have the opportunity to be uncomfortable like that.
Right.
Are there certain things that you do or that you recommend others do to kind of seek opportunities to be uncomfortable and to develop yourself in that way?
Yeah. Like I said, at the onset of this recording, I think time and experience has helped. But letting go of some pride has helped. And that's something that I noticed, you're talking about the modern day. A lot of people have, I won't say a lot, some people have issues letting go of their pride, trying to, they have this will to say the right thing at the right time. If you can let go of the pride and just be okay saying, I don't know, those type of things, that goes a long way in showing you're human, especially as a leader. Your subordinates want to know that you are human. You're not just a machine, because there's the AI debate, right? Like, is that going to make an ethical, moral decision, not based off of numbers? And so as human leaders, I think it's important to kind of check your pride at the door, take every situation as its own individual new situation. You're not going to make the right decision every time. And I do that a lot with my guys. I have at every level. There's not a whole lot of things that they can break that I can't fix. And it's not because I'm good at anything. It's just, over time and experience, you get a bigger Rolodex. You end up knowing a lot of people. So to call somebody for some help is easy. But I put them in situations, and I kind of allow situations to happen to where they get challenged. They have a legit challenge in front of them, and really any way they go is okay, especially in a training environment. That's what's awesome about a training environment. You allow them to do what they think they're supposed to do at that given time. And then especially in a training environment, you can say time out, let's talk about this. Or in the fire service, the debrief, the after action, the lessons learned, you get the band together, get the team together and talk about what went wrong, what went right, what would you do next time, at each facet of whatever mission task you just went through. And I think that's what makes it, I think the after actions, the discussions, the debates, in a firehouse, in the kitchen, you're all having lunch or dinner together. Those discussions, those debates over what color is the best, or which Pokemon is better. I have no idea, but I'll pick one and argue.
Yeah.
But I think that those times allow us to mature inherently, and I like to see those things happen naturally and just let it go.
Yeah, and to have those conversations without finger pointing, or with just a constructive, like, here's what we did and here's how it went. I feel like that's one of the most valuable ways for adults to learn, where you tee up the situation that is maybe at the peak of somebody's ability.
Yep.
And just let them do what they would want to do, and whatever happens is okay.
Exactly.
Because it's training, right?
Exactly.
That reminds me, have you ever heard of the concept of misogi?
I've heard that phrase, but I want please explain.
Man, so misogi. It stems from a Japanese ritual, a purification ritual, but it's kind of evolved to mean an annual challenge, doing something annually that is at the absolute peak of your ability. And there are two rules to it. The first is a 50-50 rule, that you've got to have no more than a 50% chance of success. You're just as likely to fail at whatever your misogi is as you are to succeed at it. And the second rule is that you can't die doing it. Right. You got to have some kind of lifeline in place.
Right.
But, I think about, putting trainees in positions at the peak of their ability. And there's kind of this movement around misogi where you force that for yourself annually, putting yourself in a position where you don't know if you're going to succeed or not. So you kind of got to check your pride, just like you talked about. And there are unknowns where you have to say, hey, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I'm going to go give it everything I got,
Sure. Well, this is probably my misogi then, because this is my first podcast. I have no idea what I'm doing. Paced around the house for a while trying to figure out exactly what stress level I want to let myself get to. I love that concept. That's a great idea. I think it is important to have that fail safe in there, that threshold where you're not going to let yourself get to. Well, that's a great idea. Absolutely.
Misogi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, mine for this year. Have you ever heard of the Bruce Protocol test?
I have not.
It's basically a treadmill test where every 3 minutes it gets faster and the incline gets steeper. We have to do it every year for our civilian fire department physical. And most people do whatever the minimum is. You're hooked up to a heart rate monitor. They say, hey, you got to get your heart rate to this level, then you can be done, which is usually around step 4 for me. There's 7 steps to this thing.
Okay. Wow.
That get exponentially harder. And so, my misogi for this year is I'm gonna try to max this thing out.
Oh man.
I have no idea what's gonna happen.
What is level 7?
I would have to look it up. It's something like a 20% incline, or a 20-degree incline, something.
Oh man.
At I want to say 5.5, which it's substantially harder than I feel like it sounds,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But that's like my thing, right? I wrote it down at the beginning of the year. It popped into my brain of like, I wonder if I can do this. Then the very next thought is, I really don't want to do that. And then like that's the thing that you got to go do.
Right.
Right. That's the thing that's uncomfortable in your brain.
Right.
So yeah, I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, please. I got to find mine. I got to figure out what mine is.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it.
And I want to add too, I feel like with anything, like anybody that does goal setting for, whether it's something like a misogi or just annual goals, there's so much power. And I'm curious if you do stuff like this personally, for me, in like writing them down, right, to be able to see them visually, maybe posting them somewhere, telling my wife that I'm going to do it. That's a huge thing to me, where the thought of her thinking, that she married a man that doesn't do what he says he's going to do.
Right.
is a huge motivator to me. Do you
Yeah.
have things like that where, if there's something that you're on the fence about or that you think, um, you know, something that's uncomfortable in your brain, something that you do to see it through?
I've got a good network around me here. I think you're right when you're talking about discussing something, having somebody else know about it always helps. I too will do that with my wife as well. Those are things that will hold me accountable inherently. But I don't have a routine like that. I probably should. Now that we're talking about it, I definitely am writing this down, and I'm gonna implement this theory. I really like it. But having a team around me, a family at work, real close, real tight. We keep each other accountable. I think that's kind of typical for any department or any kind of organization that's military or military-esque. You do hold each other accountable. I do know that I have a lot of guys at the academy that have those personal goals. You're talking about running a certain amount of miles per month, and that challenge, them challenging each other. I watch every day, watch them challenge each other to, and then talk trash when something doesn't go right. That it is through humor, and it's typically in jest. But those are the ways that we have become comfortable keeping ourselves accountable is through poking, and jabbing, whether it's verbally or it could physical, an elbow or whatever. But yeah, we do a great job of holding each other accountable. I've seen it at every level. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. To the outside eye, I feel like that stuff can be, a lot of people don't understand the way we joke with each other and the good intentions, behind, that jab or whatever it might be to, push your peer or whoever it would be to, whatever the next thing that they're capable of, that competitive spirit where I feel like that's kind of another atypical thing in modern society, that if you're working at a, 9 to 5, some sales job somewhere, you're just not experiencing that kind of camaraderie and kind of the iron sharpens iron element that comes with that.
And that's one thing that I noticed when I did get out of the Marine Corps the first time. The only time, I went from that environment, post deployment to Iraq, a little bit of time, few months, and then I was out. And I noticed right away, that's the first thing I noticed was I don't have that team, that family, and I also don't have anybody who speaks my language, which happened to be somewhat vulgar at times. And to your point, on the outside looking in, I don't know that your life or mine, the way we live, with the brother and sisterhood that we have at work, I don't know that they could even make an accurate movie around it,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, man, you alluded earlier to your leadership style, where you mentioned being vulnerable with subordinates, to the power of saying, "Hey, I don't know, but let's go find out," or letting people make mistakes. Will you kind of talk to us about your style and just some of the ways that you kind of create that trust, and whether it's operationally or in training with the people you're serving with?
Great example. So at any given time throughout the day, I've got, different service members will swing by my office and just chat. And I would say 80% of the time, I end up talking about something that had gone wrong and and it's related to something that they're talking about, but I've gone through it and I did it wrong, or I've made mistakes. And I talk a lot about mistakes that I've made, not necessarily tactically, but just things I could have done differently. And I'm typically talking to somebody who's got 15, 12 years left of what in the military. And so they have time to take what I've said and well, if I find myself in that position, I'm not going to do it the way he did it, and so I'm open with them. I'm very open with mistakes, with how I view things, not socially or politically, but how I view what we're doing, different scenarios with students, with how we're going to handle any situation. You've got hundreds and hundreds of students here, and there's always a new situation, because each one of them has a life outside of here that they're still trying to balance, and they're all brand new, and they're all just still somewhat considered, depending on what service you're in their entry level training, or their boot camp or their basic training, and so the instructors here are always trying to mentor, counsel, help them through whatever it is they're doing, because they're only a few months removed from being in high school. And so we talk a lot about war, we war game. How should we handle this situation versus that? And every situation's individual. That's the way I do things. It's not similar to this or similar to that. It's here's a new situation. Let's talk about it. But we talk a lot about experience. I'm a firm believer in telling and hearing war stories. I think that's something that is therapeutic. It's just my personal opinion. A lot of guys, some may not want to talk about things that they've seen or talking about stresses they've had, whether it's in combat or you're arriving on scene to a gnarly car wreck or whatever. I think it's important to talk about it, and I've served with a lot of people who don't think it's very important to talk about it. But what I found is when I talk about these things, or when I listen to people talk about these things, it allows me to not just empathize with what they went through, but it allows me to understand why they're making certain decisions that they're making. If you're scared to cross the street, you may have gotten hit by a car in the past. I don't know, crossing the street. So it changes you, but it's good to understand why it changes you. So we do a lot. We talk about everything, 3-4 hours a day, before work, after work, during lunch. There's always a group or many of service members, civilians here at least, just talking. And if it's not sharing stories, it's talking trash.
Yeah.
And either way, I'm good.
So hit us with one. When it comes to, a story that comes to mind, or whether it's a mistake or any kind of experience that you might leverage to, mentor a junior Marine that's coming into your office. What's, you have, some go-tos or some stories that you feel like you tell most frequently?
Not necessarily because I tell it frequently, but I'll go back to certain parts of a deployment where, I may have been admittedly nervous or scared. And that vulnerability that I'm showing them as somebody who's been in for 20 plus years, you're supposed to be a hard, you're that hard, steel type of guy, but that's just not who I am. So I'll talk about, times when I was, on a convoy in Iraq, traveling from, one really terrible area to another, with 5,000 gallons of fuel behind me. And I'll talk about there's times where we had to pull over and wait, and and you don't know, you just assume everyone's there to hurt you. You don't know any different. Your job is to drive the fuel. You're not gathering intelligence. You're not doing all that. So you just don't know. But I know the gas needs to get there. And, but having weapons pointed at you, knowing that you're what you could be, for all you know, or for all I knew, within a minute of not, breathing anymore, and not being around anymore. So I share stories of, tough times, potentially putting myself in harm's way. Those are the stories that shows my vulnerability, and especially if I'm talking to somebody who I want to open up as well. If I want someone to open up with me, and I know they need to talk about something, but they're a little apprehensive, showing some vulnerability on my side is very helpful. And it's not something I do as a tactic or a technique. It's just who I am. Like I don't have an angle. I'm not approaching situations with an angle or some sort of mission. I just see somebody in front of me who wants to talk. Oftentimes I have to deal with some of the worst situations because there's different levels that have already tried to fix something. And so, most people respond to my story with, okay, so, he's someone I can open up to. And it doesn't always work. It doesn't always help, but most of the time it does. It makes people feel comfortable and want to talk more. They want to hear more. So,
what about the leader that may not have the war stories?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think that's a pretty common in the military where, somebody that came in the last 6 to 8 years, where maybe they've got a deployment under their belt, but, they haven't really been in combat, or maybe they're the staff sergeant instructor at the academy who maybe has 1 or 2 fires under their belt, but not necessarily the career worth of knowledge to, impart on a trainee. What can somebody like that do to build trust in the kind of the vulnerability that you're talking about with their troops?
Yeah, I'll answer that in two parts. First, I've got a great example. So we just got done talking about this last week. If you look at in the Marine Corps, you take an infantry job. They're the ones going out kicking indoors. They're the ones that's their job. So an infantry platoon in the Marine Corps consists of about 40, maybe a little bit more Marines, 40. And one of those Marines is an officer. And that officer is brand new, but he or she commands 40 Marines that have an array of experience. If you look at the pyramid, that one officer's at the top, and then there's a bunch of guys or gals underneath them that has some experience. Some of them may have 4 or 5 deployments, huge stack of ribbons on their chest. Yeah. But that one officer is 22, 23, maybe 24 years old, no experience, none. They just got done with officer candidate school and whatever infantry basic training they go through. And the day one they get on to their first duty station, they are put in charge of 40 Marines who probably have a ton of experience. So how is that person supposed to lead with no experience? Well, what makes the fire service and the infantry platoon pretty unique and similar is that there's a reciprocal amount of mentorship going on. So where you have new officers or officers, fire officers with not a whole lot of tactical experience, there's a reciprocal mission that has to be conducted. It has to be done to get that person, up to speed, mentored. And in that infantry platoon, there are staff sergeants, you're talking middle management, enlisted Marines, like I said, with the 4 or 5 deployments, a ton of experience. Well, their job is to train their leader to be the leader. because that lieutenant one day is going to be a general one day. And so around every good fire officer or Marine Corps officer or CE officer, there has been a series of enlisted or subordinate mentorship upward that had to have happened. And if I often look back at maybe some of not the best leaders that I've had. Well, those leaders typically had some experiences, very similar experiences that they didn't have that mentorship. Or go back to the pride, as a brand new, fire officer or lieutenant, you got to check your pride. You got to say, I don't know. But still understand that you are in charge of the planning and execution of missions. And so you have to ask the questions. And but we all rely upon those subordinates to help mentor upward.
Yeah. Well, I guess just even having the realization, if you're that E5 instructor at the academy, you're that new officer in an infantry unit, that your vulnerability is saying, hey, I'm new, to say, hey, I don't know, just like you mentioned earlier, where, that it feels like the military leader, is all knowing, is decisive, all the things. And, if you don't have the experience to back it up, that's your vulnerability, where at the end of the day, you're responsible for making the decision, but it's okay to say, what do you think we should do? Right. Or
absolutely. Yeah. Providing recommendations. I still do it as a subordinate. I do it daily, providing recommendations to the boss on how I think we should go forward. He may not choose my recommendation, but I know that he knows my recommendation is based off of experience and in seeing a lot of things. But I don't expect anybody to take my recommendation and use it purely. So we each have a position for a reason. But to those young leaders that don't have a ton of experience, you're in a position to make a decision. You are filling that role that you've been given, and the expectation is to make decisions. And I would tell that new officer, that new leader that doesn't have the huge extensive experience, to just make decisions and learn from your mistakes. That's really all you can do. And check your pride at the door. With those three things, you're already going to have respect. People are going to respect your leadership, especially at the fire academy. There's a program of instruction. There's SOPs. It's pretty cut and dry. But in the operating forces, there's a variety of decisions that have to be made.
So how does I feel like I've seen this more with Marines than anybody else that come through FRAS, where a lot of these guys are ready to run through a brick wall, right? Every mission's a no-fail mission, and they're generally type A, and maybe their whole life they've been successful at whatever they've set out to do. And so if they're making a mistake or they're failing, it may be for, one of the first times, in their life that they've set out to do something and not done it. So, how can that person lean into failing or making mistakes? Do you got any, I guess tips there, whether it's psychologically or I feel like that's such a common thing.
Yeah, being good at failures, that's kind of weird to say. It's yeah. I don't think anybody should be good with failure, all the time. But I do, getting back up. I go back to the team. Both of us have professions to where if you're failing, and people notice. But we both have teams around us to help us get back up. And I would say that's where 100% every time go is if I fail, and whenever I did in the past, I'm looking to those to my left and to my right to help me get back up, and that's done mutually. That's something that both of us can say that's normal, and that's what makes us. I don't know, that's what makes us very good at what we do. It makes us pretty resilient too when there's a fail happen, and you've got a band of brothers to come around you to help you get back up. If, at the very least, that's something I know is coming. I know there's going to be someone that's going to come and help me back up.
Yeah, I like that. Learning to be good at failing, right?
Yeah, fail forward.
Because if you're not, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. If you're not being unsuccessful on a halfway regular basis, you're probably just setting yourself up for success by setting goals that are too lower than what you could really accomplish.
True.
And that's a weird thing to wrap your head around, because who wouldn't want to be successful at everything they want to do?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's not going to make you strong though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of experience working with subordinates from drill instructor. You've been assistant chief of operations, officer in charge, and now as a liaison officer. Do you feel like there are parallels to how you parent and encourage, how development in your kids? You've got 3 kids at home, right?
I do. Man, I was thinking about how to talk about this too, and I've been gone a lot. I've been gone a ton throughout my career, weeks, months, half a year, more at times. The one thing that's been consistent and that will always remain consistent in my life is my wife. So I give most of the credit to her. We all kind of revolve just around her. There have been times where I come back from a trip and I get in the way, but when it comes to links, man, I go back to stories. Here I am going to tell a story. So I got an opportunity to when I was in Japan about 10 years ago, to go and go from Japan to Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, and basically as a foreign exchange guy, Marine, work with the Air Force fire there and ride on shift. And I got introduced to Chief Sammy Sprouse, who is a Air Force fire legend. And he was the assistant chief of operations, and I got to ride shotgun with this legend. And I watched him. Every radio communication was smooth, was clear, it was slow. And at every incident we responded to in that, couple months I was there, a ton of different emergencies, just slow and clear, and nothing really rattled him. In between emergency responses, we would drive to station to station to station to station. He would walk in and he would ask, random firefighters how their wife so-and-so, child so-and-so was doing. He knew if one of their parents was maybe hospitalized or was sick. How's your mom doing? I'm talking 50, 60 people in this organization, and he knew everything about them. And that allowed him to to challenge them because he knew so much about them. It allowed him to put them in situations to challenge them. He knew how they were going to react at an incident. So he always seemed 3 or 4 steps ahead of not just everybody's life, but like every layer of every response. And it was so calm. Now, as it relates to parenting, I try to know, I try to know my kids. Talking to teenagers is tough sometimes because you have to pull information out. But knowing who they are, humor, my military humor is not a good humor for at home. but I've been able to have some of that humor dialed down, but just that piece of me I've been able to use with my kids. My wife and I enjoy humor. That's something that brings us all together. There's just something about laughing, like deep belly laughing together. That's something that I learned first as a young Marine,
Right.
But I think that's probably the only couple links that I could say that has, I could take from the military and make it, family man. That's probably about it.
Yeah, no, I like it, but it's so easy to, I feel like, to focus on those things as a leader, right? Knowing your people and like different strategies for how you interact with them. And forget that it applies to the exact same to family or anything else you do in life. The things that are going to make you successful as a Marine are going to make you a really good husband, a really good father.
Yep. Well, I've been in so many, just tough situations, or growing up Marine, you're inherently going to be in a miserable spot. So optimism, learning how to be optimistic about things in like the worst way is something that you just kind of naturally start to do at a certain point. I'll give you another example. So you had Marcos Martinez on a couple podcasts ago, and about 10 years right before I went over to Guam, our unit was out doing some training for a couple weeks in northern Japan, and we were out in the middle of nowhere, tents, living off MREs, those meals ready to eat, and it rained. And it must have been 50 degrees. I could see my breath, and it was cold, and it rained a lot. And I just, like, everybody around me was completely miserable, to the point where you really can't really do your job real well, but it's a great opportunity to see who can keep going. But I remember, we had lunch, we were taking lunch, and so Marcos and I, we grabbed our meals, the little bag meal, and there was a little bridge in the woods where a river had kind of run under it, and we sat on the bridge, and we sat there just listening to the rain. There's not an inch of me that's dry, and all of a sudden it poured. The biggest raindrops I've ever seen, and like I've never seen anything like that. A sheet of water, and all of a sudden he started laughing, and I started laughing, and it was the most miserable, one of the more miserable times of my life, and we're both laughing, and I remember he told me, he said, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else right now, and I got warm. I felt like I was dry, like I was like, me too, and we sat there laughing. Our meals were soup at that point, but those are the moments that we talk about still every time we meet up. That we bring that up. Remember that bridge, and I think every military guy or gal has those experiences where, man, that was miserable. That was terrible, but that's what you're talking about. Those are the stories that you talk about. No one ever talks about that one time where they were the most comfortable. And that's what makes, our professions special, because like you said, you're working that 9 to 5 in a business selling something. You're not going to get those opportunities to sit in the freezing cold, wet, and share that misery with somebody. So I look back on those instances, and those are the stories that I talk about with my guys. Those are the times where you really learn, one, who you are, but you also learn, two, who's there with you, who can you count on, because I know there's a handful of people that I can call any day, any time, and they're going to answer the phone. But I only know that because I shared some real misery with them.
Yeah. I think it's easy to lose sight of how temporary those moments can be.
Right.
right? Like there's a 100% chance that me, you, Master Guns Martinez, we're going to be some old guy somewhere sitting on a park bench, and the window of opportunity in your life to be doing things like that, that are hard, that are exhausting, or whatever it might be. It's such a short part of your life, right? If you spend 20, 25 years in the military, a quarter of your life, is what you've got as a window of opportunity to do hard things and create memories like that. It doesn't last forever, and I feel like it's easy to think that it will, and to not stop and kind of smell the roses when those opportunities arise.
Yeah, I have 20 plus years of those stories, and it would take 15, 30 podcasts to name all of the people that I've shared those exact experiences with every single step of the way. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I would go back and do this again in a heartbeat, every single miserable thing, because good or bad, right or wrong, it made me who I am. I'm not perfect. I don't know all the things. I'm not particularly really good at anything. But I have a great bucket of people that I've been able to collect along the way, that they're here for me, I'm here for them. And that's what makes our, yours and my profession amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I think that's the perfect way to put a bow on this thing. Is there
All
anything,
right.
any final thoughts or things you want to add before we finish up?
I really appreciate this. This has been fun. It's fun to talk to somebody that to kind of get to know you. And these opportunities probably don't come very often, so I appreciate you reaching out. I really wish I could mention everybody that has helped shape me, but they know who they are, and maybe we could do this again sometime.
That sounds good. Well, man, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate, obviously, your service to our country and what you're doing down at the schoolhouse. So thanks, you.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, Chris.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fire Dog Podcast. You can find more episodes like this on our website, firedog.us, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on social media. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at the Fire Dog Podcast. That is the Fire DAWG Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow to stay updated on every new episode. We'd appreciate it if you'd also share this podcast with your friends and coworkers, either on social media or right there in your firehouse. This episode was hosted by Chris Boykley with guest Chief Warrant Officer Justin Barnes. Until next time, stay safe.